Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I appreciate you being here, and today we're diving into one of the most discussed and shocking events in recent news, the explosion that struck the Crimean Bridge. This incident didn't just make headlines. It caused a genuine wave of disbelief and confusion across Russia, dramatically shifting conversations, both online and on the ground. With so many questions swirling around about what actually happened, who was behind it, how it was carried out, and why so many Russians were stunned, we're going to break everything down in clear and simple terms. When news first broke early on June 3, 2025, many people were still asleep. The first reports suggested that something had disrupted traffic on the Crimean Bridge, but details were thin. By the time morning crept in, the picture became more dramatic. Ukrainian security forces announced that they had carried out a calculated underwater operation. The Security Service of Ukraine, known as the SBU, claimed responsibility and described how the attack was carried out using underwater explosives positioned over months of preparation. They reported that the blast occurred around 4:44 a.m. and involved over 1,000 kilograms of TNT equivalent explosives placed directly beneath the structure. That specific detail alone sent shockwaves through Russian audiences, as the idea of divers placing bombs beneath one of Russia's most heavily guarded structures seemed almost unthinkable. For those who may not know why this bridge means so much, the Crimean Bridge is not just a convenient crossing. It stretches nearly 19 kilometers and serves as the only direct physical link Russia has to Crimea since the peninsula's annexation. From a logistical standpoint, it is crucial for transport, troop movement, and supply chains during the ongoing conflict. From a symbolic standpoint, it represents Russia's claim and control over Crimea. The bridge has been featured in state media, political speeches, and national celebrations. It was portrayed as something nearly untouchable, a demonstration of authority and engineering strength. To see it hit again, despite reinforced defenses, shook many Russians on a psychological level. The footage of the explosion released by the SBU did nothing to calm nerves. In the video, a burst of water erupts upward as the underwater charges detonated. For Russians who had been told repeatedly that the bridge was secure and monitored, the idea that such an attack could occur beneath the surface, where cameras and patrols are less capable, raised uncomfortable questions. Was the security overstated? Were defenses weaker underwater than anyone expected? Or was this operation simply too sophisticated to predict and prevent? The Ukrainian side emphasized that the mission required months of preparation and that operatives had managed to mine the pillars quietly and patiently, waiting for the right moment to strike. Many Russians were stunned not just by the explosion itself, but by the stealth and precision that made it possible. Adding to the shock was the fact that this was not the first time the bridge had been attacked. Previous strikes had caused closures and visible damage, prompting repairs and tighter security. But this time felt different for many observers, especially those inside Russia. This operation targeted the underwater foundations rather than the roadway or upper structure, suggesting a shift in strategy that caught many off guard. People began asking how such a large amount of explosives could be placed without detection, especially given Russia's strong emphasis on securing Crimea. Online discussions spread rapidly, with users expressing disbelief at how an operation of this complexity could slip past the defenses that state officials had repeatedly praised. Despite the boldness of the Ukrainian claim, Russian officials initially attempted to downplay the extent of the damage. Russian state outlets reported that the bridge had suffered limited or minimal harm, and that traffic was halted only temporarily. They announced that the bridge reopened after a few hours and insisted the situation was under control. Many Russians clung to these statements as reassurance, but others were less convinced, arguing that the lack of visible damage above water didn't necessarily mean the structure was fully secure. Engineers and analysts online raised concerns about how underwater explosions can weaken critical load, bearing pillars without immediately showing visible results. These conversations spread quickly, and even discussions on international forums on Reddit highlighted confusion over whether the damage was superficial or more serious. What made matters more dramatic was the contrast between the Ukrainian and Russian narratives. On one side, the SBU described the attack as carefully planned, strategically targeted, and essential for weakening Russian logistics in Crimea. They argued that Russia had turned the bridge into a military supply lifeline, making it a legitimate target. Ukrainian officials also emphasized that they avoided civilian casualties while performing a high-precision strike. On the other side, Russia framed the attack as another act of sabotage that was unsuccessful in its aims, pointing to the bridge's quick reopening as proof that Ukraine had failed to cause meaningful harm. This clash of narratives intensified debate among Russians who weren't sure which version of events to trust. One of the biggest reasons Russians were stunned, though, was emotional rather than technical. The Crimean Bridge is tied deeply to national identity and political symbolism. It was opened with grand ceremony and promoted as proof that Crimea had permanently returned to Russia. For many ordinary citizens, the bridge represented stability, connection, and pride. When it was first attacked years ago, that symbolism took a hit, but people accepted the government's assurances that security had improved and vulnerabilities were fixed. This new attack broke through those assurances in a way that felt personal for many. Even people who weren't politically engaged felt shaken by the idea that something so important could be damaged again. The repeated targeting of the bridge challenged the idea that Russia had firm control over Crimea's security. Another factor that added to the shock was the precision and creativity of the strike. Many Russians had believed that Ukraine lacked the capability to hit the bridge in such a technical and stealthy manner. Underwater explosives planted over months implied a level of operational sophistication that many people had not expected. This forced some Russians to rethink assumptions about the balance of capability between the two sides. Whether they supported or opposed the war, the attack was a reminder that surprises were still possible, even against heavily monitored sites. That unpredictability made people uneasy, especially those living in Crimea or regions close to the conflict. The timeline of the event also contributed to the widespread attention it received. Because the blast happened early in the morning, rumors spread long before the official narratives solidified. Social media accounts posted fragments of video, eyewitness reports, and speculation. Some posts suggested major damage. Others said the bridge was half destroyed. These claims circulated rapidly before being clarified, leaving many Russians fearing the worst in the meantime. Even after official explanations were issued, the earlier uncertainty lingered in people's minds, reinforcing the sense of shock. When traffic resumed later that morning, it helped calm some fears, but the fact that Russian authorities closed the bridge after the explosion, even for a few hours, confirmed to many that something significant had occurred. Temporary closures in the past had happened after earlier attacks, so the pattern felt familiar and unsettling. People worried that repeated strikes could eventually undermine the bridge long-term, even if the damage from this particular blast seemed limited, according to Russian sources. Engineers appearing on Russian talk shows attempted to reassure viewers by insisting that the design of the bridge included redundancy, such as multiple support pillars, but doubts still persisted. In the aftermath, conversations across Russian social media highlighted a mixture of disbelief, frustration, and fear. Some users expressed anger at what they saw as security failures. Others dismissed Ukrainian claims, insisting the damage was exaggerated. A number of people simply felt exhausted by the continued tensions surrounding Crimea and wondered how many more incidents would occur before long. Promised stability would return. Among younger Russians especially, the event reignited debates about the conflict's direction and the government's ability to protect critical infrastructure. On the Ukrainian side, the response was different. Many Ukrainians saw the strike as a symbolic victory, a demonstration that even the most guarded Russian assets were vulnerable. Messages celebrating the operatives involved circulated widely, and Ukrainian officials framed the operation as a necessary step to disrupt Russian military logistics. They also emphasized that Crimea remains part of Ukraine under international law, and that targeting infrastructure used for military purposes was justified. These statements were met with anger in Russia, but also with acknowledgement from some analysts that the attack had achieved its intended psychological effect. The wider international community reacted with concern, especially regarding the implications for escalating conflict. Analysts outside the region noted that underwater attacks require specialized training and equipment, suggesting a new level of tactical evolution. They pointed out that underwater structures are often harder to defend than land-based ones, meaning this kind of attack could open the door to similar operations elsewhere. For countries watching the conflict closely, the incident was a reminder that modern warfare adapts quickly, and that infrastructure thought to be secure may not be as protected as assumed. As the story continued to develop over the next several days, Russian news outlets maintained that the bridge was structurally sound and fully operational. But satellite images and independent assessments led some viewers to believe that the true extent of the damage might not be fully disclosed publicly. This tension between official statements and public skepticism kept the topic alive in online discussions, fueling speculation about future attacks and long-term vulnerabilities. Even without visible collapse, the sense that something fundamental had been shaken lingered beneath the surface. In conversations across Russian cities, people expressed a range of reactions. Some felt confident that the government would reinforce the bridge and respond decisively. Others worried that repeated attacks signaled that no amount of reinforcement could guarantee security. For families living in Crimea, the incident was particularly unnerving. Many rely on the bridge for travel, supplies, or connection to mainland Russia. Every disruption, no matter how brief, reminds them of how fragile that connection can be in times of conflict. The attack also raised deeper questions about how secure Crimea itself truly is. Even though Russia has invested heavily in military presence and infrastructure on the peninsula, events like this highlight that absolute security may be impossible. Ukraine's ability to penetrate those defenses repeatedly challenges the perception that Crimea is beyond reach. This creates not only logistical concerns, but also psychological ones, especially for Russians who believed that Crimea was permanently under Russia's protective umbrella. For people outside Russia, it may be hard to understand the emotional weight the Crimean Bridge carries inside the country. It isn't just a transportation route. It's a symbol of political achievement, national pride, and territorial control. Every attack on the bridge is therefore not just a physical strike, but a symbolic one. This is why many Russians felt stunned. It wasn't only about what happened, but what it represented. Each explosion echoes far beyond the broken concrete or damaged steel. It echoes through the political narrative that the bridge helped build. Looking ahead, many Russians are now anticipating what steps the government will take next. Will security be increased further? Will there be retaliatory actions? Will more resources be redirected to protect infrastructure? These are open questions that analysts are still debating, and the answers may shape how the conflict unfolds in the future. But for ordinary citizens, the focus is often simpler. They want reassurance, stability, and the return of a sense of safety that was shaken by the underwater blast. As we reflect on why this incident stunned so many Russians, it becomes clear that it's not just about explosions or engineering. It's about symbolism, identity, and the ongoing uncertainty that surrounds the region. It's also about the shock of seeing something previously believed to be secure suddenly exposed as vulnerable. And regardless of one's political perspective, it's easy to understand why such an event would resonate deeply with people who have been told repeatedly that the bridge was safe. That's the full breakdown of why the explosion on the Crimean Bridge left so many Russians stunned, and why this incident matters far beyond the physical damage reported. Thank you for staying with me through this deep dive into one of the most complex and emotional stories unfolding right now. If you found this explanation informative, feel free to stay tuned for more content just like this. Let me know if you want a shorter version, a more dramatic tone, or a script tailored for a specific platform.